The story began with the appearance of powerful monsters in the Antares Empire, namely in the capital of Rifon. The lord sitting on a horse said that million of their brave warriors were defeated by an evil demon. The knight replied that died from long-range magic and summoned creatures another. Were seriously injured, the lord said. The demon king may have destroyed their world, filling it with evil, but they will end it. He will fall at the hands of great heroes. The knight shouted glory to the wisdom of his majesty. After some time, the heart of the great demon palace, Garrick, the hall of the abyss, Alex shouted. With a serious face, his atrocities are over. It's time for this fiend of hell to return to the darkness. Rafen Har, sitting on the throne, looked at them with a serious face. Cyrus, his face furious, holding his sword, shouted that they would destroy him, and his death would mark the fall of the evil empire. The demon king replied, what a pity. And he had put so much effort into creating this empire, and why call it the evil empire? When there is a name Anners, the sun shines equally for everyone. By the way, Tisan shouted angrily, he is raising the devil's spawn here. By destroying him, they will wipe off the face of the earth all these vicious monsters that came from the underworld. Riffenhar thought they came from the underworld, of course. Well, they need Ariason. In fact, he simply taught the monsters human tactics. They have been oppressed all their lives, and he only gave them a way to resist it, and they immediately became vicious. How human is that? He asked. Have they already defeated the 4 heavenly kings? Cyrus, with a serious face, answered that it was true. These filthy orcs are no match for his sword. Renard shouted furiously, do they mean to tell you that even the brave great orc Todd has been defeated? He thought about it. Orcs may be menacing in appearance, but they are essentially hunter-gatherers. They would never betray a fellow. Orcs fight the strong, protecting the weak. How dare these humans call them monsters? Yes, they have hygiene problems, but still. Tisan, a sked with a smile, the 4 heavenly kings nonsense. They are actually just disgusting trolls, who got what they'd serve for their sins. Reinhardt thought, even a Tilker is dead. He knows trolls look scary. But isn't that too rude to them? But they are close to nature and the spirits of their ancestors, Plin said. The evil dwarf who worshipped the god of Tima was also called to account for his deeds. Riffenhar said with a displeased face, they even finished off Melon. He wondered, since when was the god of the dwarves, Alpat, a god of darknessy, are so arrogant for them? Everyone except the TW gods and Seer are just fiends of hell. Jade said with a smile. He also overthrew that vicious dark elf. His magic was too much for her, Riefenhar shouted, with wild rage manifesting his magical energy. They killed her. Toothy are practically begging for death, Tisan shouted. Now he has shown his true colors, a dark elf demon, who is defected to the side of darkness. There will be no mercy for such traitors. Renhard asked a dark elf. They will admit that her skin has become a little darker than theirs, but that is only because they humans cut down all the trees, forcing her people to flee to the barren lands, and they blame her for her dark skin color. The purest high elf Alex, holding the sword in his hands, confidently shouted, he will avenge the fallen with the help of this sword. Reinhardt, his eyes black from demonic magic, asked, they do not know how to listen, do they? And what about the rest of the fallen who will avenge them? Alex shouted. How mean it is if not for his powers of darkness. The monsters would never have gone over to the side of evil. They would still live their usual normal lives. Reinhardt, radiating a huge amount of energy, thought that it was useless, because they do not hear him at all. For them, any non-human specie that does not agree to live the life of a slave, immediatal bones, a servant of darkness, and this is a suitable reason for extermination, used magic, and shouted in this case. He will become the king of demons that they so want to see him. In an instant, the holy warriors rose into the air. Reinhardt thought, as he used his abilities, that he was just an ordinary greed mage. Humans were reluctant to acknowledge other intelligent races as equals. Elves were servants to them. Lucky now to live a little longer than humans. Dwarves were laborers, especially useful in the mines. Orcs were nothing more than draft horses, and trolls were generally used as ingredients in healing potions. They were all just spineless slaves with no opinions of their own. He was deeply impressed when he discovered their culture and its roots. He studied them and got to know them better. He discovered the spirit magic of the elves and trolls. Combining their knowledge, he became the first in history to reach the circle of magic to expand his horizons. He interacted with them, and Hesimli couldn't stand to see how they were treated, so he began to help them. His territory was expanding, and it was becoming more and more difficult to deceive humans. That's when they began to attack them. Their attacks never stopped. They destroyed their structures, plundered their lands, forcing them to flee further and further. But then they started fighting back, and somehow it all led to the expansion of their lands. There were more and more of them until they turned into the Empire of An. That's how he founded this place. Although he did not hate humans, he simply believed that other species were no worse than humanity. None of them were going to oppress humans in return. But everything turned out differently. The citizens of Antares just wanted to live in peace on their land, but for humans their desires and actions were equated with the machinations of the devil. They can be understood. After all, his army consists mainly of orcs and goblins, and they are not the most attractive creatures, but killing them for such a stupid reason, this is simply unacceptable. Reinhardt, using his magical ability, shouted that it was his duty to protect the empire. If their laws allow senseless killings, then he will abolish them and create new ones. Alex, under the influence of his magical ability, was seriously injured and fell to the ground. Reinhardt shouted, "He is sure that they have received the title of heroes, having achieved success with the sword and magic, but in fact, they lack mastery in both." He thought simply, but he can do a lot of things, but overall he is quite weak. Most book heroes are frankly lucky to survive in the ending. However, in reality, it is more expedient to hit one point now. Only the king of martial arts Tisan remains. This man is known for his physical strength. Others were not difficult to defeat, but this guy is completely different. After all, he is just one of those. Ho hits one point, it will be hard to defeat him. Tisan began to attack with lightning speed, pursuing the protagonist. Reinhardt, after unsuccessful attempts to escape, created a magic shield. But the enemy easily broke through it and struck Jim in the head. The protagonist, bleeding, asked, "Is that all he can do?" He blocked his blow with magic. Tisan shouted with a serious face as expected of the leader off. The demons. Reinhardt thought about it. His spine was broken. At this rate, he would soon die. He needed to kill him somehow, but he had no chance of winning in his current state. Tisan said he would send him to a personal trial. The protagonist, clutching his head, said that he had one. He answered with a serious face. He believed that they were all now free from his evil spell. Reinhardt thought about it with a frightened face. He was about to give up, but he couldn't. Free from evil spells? Is he serious, Dosh? Think that for them to live a slave life is the natural order of things. He will not resign himself. It simply infuriates him. The protagonist, with an angry face, took out an object and shouted, "This is the Eye of Space and Time that he found in the ancient ruins, an extremely powerful artifact that even he, a circle mage, still has not fully deciphered." Tisan asked furiously, "What is he trying to do?" Reinhardt answered, "A regression spell. It will turn back time and disrupt divine providency." Started to use the item and thought he doesn't even know if it will work, but he has nothing to lose. Cadians, how did let him try to stop it? Tisan, with a furious face, began to attack, and with powerful magical energy, Reinhardt thought, he can't let himself die, not like this in an instant. A powerful explosion was heard after some time. The protagonist woke up in a forest house. He thought these sounds, warmth, and feelings of comfort. Is he still alive? Did he really succeed that spell that hadn't decipher even half of he said he knew? He was a genius, but he didn't think it would work. Where did he wake up? It seems like a time jump did happen, but he doesn't remember such a place in his past. I wonder how old he is now. The main character got out of bed and, looking at his muscles, said most guys would die of envy. But who is he? Where did he get so many calluses? His whole body is in scars and muscles. It's disgusting. A magician needs magic. What are these six-pack abs for? It's strange, of course, to talk about yourself like that. Did he really screw up the spell of moving in time and space, and that's why he ended up in the body of a random guy? Maybe he is not in the past. What if stayed in the present, but exchanged souls between two? Buddy-esh looked in the mirror and thought these thick red eyebrows, stubborn look, and pursed lips. If you imagine this carcass a little wider and with hair on his face, you get the unstoppable king of martial arts, Tisan. Suddenly his mentor called out to him and said that the sun was already high in the sky. Why is he still hanging around here? Why doesn't he go outside? Today is another great day ahead of them. Tisan asked fearfully. Who is it? The mentor asked thoughtfully. Why is he looking at him as if he saw him for the first time? The protagonist answered excitedly. He asks this because he really does not know. He asked discontentedly, does he want to use the excuse of amnesia a second time? He thought that once was enough for him to understand that it would not work. The mentor grabbed his head and said with a smile, they are going to train now, the main character asked. It seems this guy is Tezen Mentor, the strongest warrior of the continent of all time and peoples, that the king of martial arts, Gerard the mentor, tied him to a tree. The protagonist asked fearfully, maybe he should listen to him first, he answered with a calm face, something he talks too much today, so now they will begin training. The mentor took the bamboo and began to strike the body. The protagonist, with tears in his eyes, wondered what the hell is going on here. Gerard began to strike even more times. Tisan thought, with tears, is this how he will die? Thought with a serious face, his hands are somehow strange today, as if they have become softer than they were as. It really amnesia, but their fighting clan is an unbreakable gym that knows no rest. They training credo, perseverance and work will be ground to dust. Short-term memory loss is common for them. He also once fell into unconsciousness during training. Well, since the matter is trivial, the solution is simple. The mentor began to inflict a huge number of blows and said he will fry him. Well, and he will recover. Only weaklings need to use weapons, those war weak in body hide and armor behind swords. The protagonist thought, does he really call people weak because they use segment? Gerard shouted furiously, these are all excuses. It should be a shame not to be able to overcome your weaknesses, and that's what training is for, Tezen thought. About it, it was the first time in his life that he was being told such nonsense. The mentor said, furious lips are like steel, the more they are beaten, the more they become hardened. He is a student whom he chose. Personality, him believe him. There are no limits to physical development, let him become steel. Gerard thought about it. Notavirian is able to become stronger through training. After all, only he quality iron becomes steel, and only a select few can have a steel form, and he is one of them. The mentor struck again and shouted, let him think a booth ocean. Oceans absorb everything, but they do not change, let him imagine. Thath is the ocean, let him reveal his ocean. The protagonist resigned himself and began to imagine the ocean coast. Gerard threw down the bamboo and said, that's enough for today, let him go rest. Tessen sighed. With a pitiful look, he did not die, he was beaten so much, but he survived. Thank you for being so strong. After some time, the protagonist was taking a bath. He thought, are the petals and leaves of Garal a healing potion? One bottle costs silver, and here is a whole bathtub. He said he heard that queen's bath in milk to get velvety skin, but that is nothing compared to this. Why does he need a healing bath? Gerard said steel alloys needs to be cooled after forging. The protagonist thought, after working out the entire skeletal muscular system on the brink of death, he quickly recovers and uses the power of the aura and healing potions. Thus his body returns to shape before it has time to break, and he becomes stronger, so the method really works. Gerard thought he with Tisan, so he knows very well how strong his body is. It seems that he has constantly undergone such training since childhood. The protagonist plunged into the water and thought, now he is sure that he is still in the past. I wonder, and the real him of this time is like now. He wondered if young Renhar even existed. Can two identical souls live in the same dimension? If so, he had two guesses. First, Renhar was from Thephature, and he who was inside Tisan coexisted with the current young Demon King. Second, young Riffenhart's body was now inhabited by the martial arts king Tisan. After some time, the mentor brought a large amount of food, and said with a smile, let him eat. The overworked body needs to replenish its supply of nutrients after eating. They climbed the mountains, and Gerard shouted, now they were going for a run. To shake everything off at the top, the mentor asked if he was tired, maybe they should continue their morning workout. The main character, doing push-ups on his fingers, said Thaith was not tired at all. After some time, he holding a weight in his teeth and holding a huge bag on his shoulders began to do abdominal exercises right on the edge of the mountain. He wondered how long this merciless mess would continue. After some time, the protagonist lies on the bed completely exhausted. He thought he Reincarnated as T-san from the past, I wonder how this will affect the future if he is the past him. What will happen if they meet the uniqueness of the Sulis, an immutable rule underlying this world? If unlucky, the soul may cease to exist. Little Renard will be inactive as a magician for the next years, but he also continuously studies, reading books to himself, in the magic tower of Delia, so in theory they cannot collide. But what if T-san is in his Bodino? Then he will definitely come for his soul. His strength is in his body. Train be the indestructible Jim, and with his frail body, he can do little. The indestructible Jim is a method that requires the participation of his mentor. He will never cope with it alone, although, given his experience, he can find a way. The protagonist went outside, and looking around, said one way or another, his priority now is to escape from this mental hospital. He started running, and thought he will never set foot here again, no matter what happens. Will definitely escape from here. Suddenly, the mentor appeared on his way and asked with a smile where he was going. T-san fearfully wondered how this creepy old man ended up here. Gerard Sadie had been suspiciously quiet for the last 2 months, and now he was running away again. This is not the first time. Probably the 9th. Soon, they will move to a double-digit account, the protagonist said fearfully. He is Relinat T-san. His name is Renhard, and he is a magician. The mentor asked his fascinating stories again. The last time he assured that he came from another world. He talked about gods and dragons that he met. What else? Was there a great master from the Wang Empire in the east, from a place called who lived a second life, or something like that, although this time he is a special like in Ving. This is progress. Oh, well, it is time for them to sleep. He grabbed him by the head, and the protagonist thought, this damned old man, today he failed, but tomorrow he will definitely achieve his goal. Yes, today he screwed up. He admits it, but he does not think that he will allow himself to be locked up here forever. Gerard said it reminds him of him in his student years. Let him believe, understands him perfectly. Let him not worry. He just needs to be patient a little. Everything will pay off. Hepromises, the protagonist thought. He resigned himself to the thought that it was simply impossible to escape from this weirdo. No wonder they called him the Demon King, because the word give up was not in his vocabulary. After some time, Gerard training asked, is he aware that the indestructible Jim has more than ways to prevent students from escaping? Throughout its history, there was no student who did not try to escape or pretend to be sick. The protagonist, with a serious face, sweating, thought. He is sure that even if he is lucky enough to get out of here, this old man will turn the earth upside down, but we'll find him. It is better to officially get permission to leave these mountains. So spent 2 years in this wonderful prison, and he was even able to awaken the aura. He heard that Cyrus, the recognized holy sword, managed to do this only in his S. Who would have thought that he would manage without even reaching after? The protagonist awakened the aura. Gerard joyfully shouted, why are you in your eyes? Then Destructible Jim can do even more if you develop the instincts of self-preservation in parallel with physical data. His will to live will increase survival and also manifest his power, known as aura. Now even such astic will not hurt him now. They will move on to the next stage. T-Song Bitwill. They study normal martial arts. What is next? According to his plan, he wondered. Is it possible that he will descend from this damned mountain? The mentor, with a smile spewing a huge amount of energy, said, stage pairing with him. And so 3 more years passed. Sometime later, in the kingdom of Vasily, southern lands, Thelarched mountains, rugged terrain. It seems he is not doing enough. T-San once againist the horn of disaster ability, and thought this is an explosive blow that he delivers by concentrating all his power in one point of his body. At the same time, the concentrated aura has the shape of a horn, hence the name Horn of Disaster. He made a huge hole in the mountain and said he needs to somehow advance to the 4th stage. The protagonist thought the final stage of the Horn of Disaster is the 9th. This is a blow that explodes 9 waves, which can even kill a god. As far as he knows, the real T-San of his time was limited to only the 7th stage. Even teacher Gerard only reached the 8th stage. The mentor said that he would let him leave the mountains only if he reached at least the 4th stage. He said, for the first time in a long time, he went down to the nearest village. Maybe he will linger there for a drink. In the past, He would definitely take this opportunity to escape, but he needs to complete his endurance training. The protagonist raised his hands, and using the ability, said let Delar become a bullet from Thier, and hit the enemy. The charge of magic hit the tree, but did not cause damage, Tison said in bewilderment. His booty is clearly resisting, he barely remembers his magical skills, because of this forced movement into the past. Anthen. There is the meager supply of mana, coupled with stupid brain knot. Inclined to calculations, is it really that he will no longer be a magician? Suddenly he felt a powerful energy, and looking into the depths of the forest said, this energy does not come from a person. An orc with a sword came out of the bushes, and excitedly said, let him pretend Thath did not see him, and then he will not touch him. Tison thought, as he thought. This is an orc, judging by his size. He is 2 years old. It seems that he is hiding from someone, maybe he escaped from the arena. The orc sees that he is not hostile, and tries to negotiate. He is definitely one of those who does not want senseless sacrifices, and behaves with dignity even in such a difficult situation. The protagonist asked, is someone chasing him? The orc asked. In surprise, how does a man know the great language? Indeed, he is right, he is being chased. Tison said he wants to help. Does he believe him? Thurk replied, he knows the great language, which means he is like a brother to him, and he senses his truth. True kinness with all his soul, but helping him can put him at risk too. The protagonist thought what an expressive speech. He hases. He really one of the nobles, he said with a smile. He has enough strength to help, let him believe him. He began to Useeth ability, and created a magic portal, the orc asked in surprise. Is he also a magician? Tison asked, is that really strange? He replied, with such a body he accepts his help with gratitude. Suddenly mercenaries appeared, who said discontentedly how much trouble for a couple of silver coins. Bry called out, oh. The protagonist and asked with a serious face, has a small orc passed by here? The second mercenary shouted, Huel, give him gold if he tells. He asked, discontentedly, what other gold? The mercenary answered with a smile, let him calm down, he will not get anything, they will just find out the information and move on. Tison said, with a calm face. He did not see anyone. Another mercenary looked at the ground, and said there are orc tracks. Brght said. That means he is there. The protagonist thought, basic magic, did not even clean the tracks. He said, this is his home actually. He will not let them in, just like that. Brig asked. Aggressively, was he crazy? How dare some idiot from the wilderness get in their way? There are more than a dozen of them. What is there to be afraid of? The mercenary said. This man is kind of strange, Bright asked. Stop fussing, let them get out of the way. Did he understand? He thinks he's a total muscle man, right? It's all nonsense. A kid is a kid. The protagonist remembered his mentor saying that his fists were a dangerous tool. Just one hit, and he could easily take a life. Let him show mercy to the weak. For someone with strength in his fists, a weapon will help him. Tison took out Abaton and said with a sly smile, let them not be afraid, at least they won't die from a blow from this. He thought that Indestructible Jim focused on the art of barehanded combat, but that didn't mean it didn't include handling weapons. Mercenaries started screaming furiously. Did this idiot take a baton? Was he really going to attack? Was he pretending to be a great fighter or something? The protagonist started hitting everyone with a baton, and thought the teachings allowed the use of weapons, but not for the purpose of real combat, but more for the education of students. However, they are still mercenaries, who earn their living with a sword. It specializes in attacking the enemy's body, and it doesn't even have a defensive movements. It's all about offense. Suddenly one of the mercenaries struck him in the back with a sword, beaut in an instant. The metal weapon bent. The protagonist hit him in bewilderment, and thought the blade didn't penetrate him at all. Is this really a human body? He knows that it belongs to him, but this is too much. The best thing about this technique is that it doesn't aim to kill the enemy, and since they won't die, there's no point in worrying. Even if their joints are torn, or their bones are broken, they won't die. No deaths, no matter what happens, they won't die. Brojed, in fear. What's his name? Let him speak, Tison said. It seems he hasn't figured out yet how to behave. It's not fair that he's whole while his friends are already praying to their ancestors. The protagonist dealt a couple more blows, and the mercenaries began to leave. He looked at the broken club, and said he had warmed up. Well, it was even a pity that It was all over already. He wondered if maybe he should get some students himself so that he would have someone to beat. He seems to have unconsciously become imbued with the philosophy of the indestructible Jimid. That time an orc came out and bowing his head and kneeling thanked him and said he would not forget this until the end of his days, and he would definitely repay his kindness. Tison asked if it was proper for a warrior to bow his head so easily. He replied that he had saved his life and even made him look at things in a new way. He was his mentor of his whole life. When the time came, he would definitely dedicate his sword to him. The protagonist thought, in Orish culture, a mentor of life is someone they honor, something like a knight's oath. If we speak in human language, the orc asked if he could know his name. The protagonist answered with a smile, his name is Renart. The orc said nobly, he will remember this name. He said the world belongs to people. Where will he go next? What is his final goal? He answered, their continent is huge. He is sure there will be a safe place for him, and if not, he would rather die a free wanderer than become a slave. The protagonist said, south of the Laird Im Mountains, 2 weeks walk away, there is an aimless wasteland. His people call it the land of trials. Let him set foot there. The orcs of the Blue Bear tribe hide there. Well, now it is time for him to go. The orc started to run, and Satan. He went to the protagonist, shouted, what is his name? He shouted, he is Thiessen of Krot, the heir to the axe of Lot. His name is Tahad. The protagonist thought in surprise, one of the 4 heavenly kings. The great warrior Tahad. He was the head of the Blue Bear tribe, and later led all the orcs on thick continent. Could the real Tison also have met him in his past life? Given his personality, he would hardly have extended a helping hand to an orc. That was definitely a fateful meeting. The protagonist remembered all his friends and said that he hoped that they would meet again. His friends, his family, are the descendants of great warriors. After some time, the protagonist thought half a year had passed since that strange meeting with Tahid. At this time, the mentor furiously used the ability of an air bullet and shouted, let him bite. Tison, frightened, used the vortex guard technique and said, this is too much. Gerard happily said, this is very good. His vortex guard is beyond praise, but Harema moans as if it were yesterday. How, after another scolding, he whined about the fact that he was some kind of Reifenhart, and not Tison. The protagonist asked why. Remember what happened years ago? The mentor said that it had been years since he had started teaching him. He had become much stronger than he had been at the beginning. But why was he still so small? Tison asked in confusion. What did he mean? He was almost tall. Gerard shouted furiously. This is all nonsense. The member of the indestructible gym must exceed the indicator of M. Did he really follow the breathing technique? He taught him correctly. The protagonist thought about it. However, the real Tison was really about tall, he said. That build is not that important, the protagonist thought with displeasure. Is he crazy? Will definitely not get taller than he is now, no matter what. If he starts breathing like he was taught, he will not be able to fit through any doorway. The mentor said that he is quite strong, even for such a small body. Okay, it's time, Tasha. What he can do? Tison flew into the air and used the 4th stage of the Horn of Disaster. In an instant, all thighs in the area collapsed. Gerard laughed happily and shouted, this is excellent. No, it will definitely not be easy to defeat him, the protagonist thought, with a smile on his face. He did it. He has really reached the 4th stage. The teacher said it was time for him to go to the outside world. He has worked very hard now. He is free to live the way he wants. He doesn't care who he becomes, a hero or a villain. Let him live the way he sees fit. This is a reward for all his efforts. Years ago, Master Rossel, the 3rd king of martial arts, told him something. Gerard remembered him, saying, "Gleet him. Remember 3 things first. Making money is good, but you shouldn't get involved in dishonest things." He asked, in confusion. "What do you mean?" He said that he doesn't mind him being a villain. Rao said, "If he wants to become Yon, let him become a worthy villain. He must have style after all," Gerard said. In confusion, what kind of strange notions are these about villains? Razel said. "Second, whenever possible, let him talk each side of those who have been treated unfairly. After all, it's better when those around you appreciate and respect you. Isn't it?" Gerard asked. "Does he mean?" The Rastal replied, "Weakness is not always a result of unfair treatment. After all, the world is already full of those weaker than him. He should be able to distinguish them right. Thirdly, and most importantly, let him carry the teachings of the indestructible gym to the masses and let him make sure that it is not interrupted at present. The mentor said he will need to find a student to whom he will pass on their great techniques. Did he understand now? The protagonist replied. He will keep this in mind. Gerard threw him a bag and said with a smile, let him know that finding a talented student is not easy. He can spend almost this entire life on this still. If such an opportunity one day presents itself, let him not miss it. Let him take this here is money for the journey, and plus his clothes. Tison asked in bewilderment. Did only silver? He thought that he had become rich in the kingdom of Vasily. Doesn't he have his own estate in the capital? He expected much more, although this is half of a commoner's annual salary. Gerard said with a smiley. Payment for those who graduated was set by the clan. This was also raised due to inflation in his time. It was silver. He prepared a small gift for him in the Satalard Mountains. There is a mark on the map, so he will figure it out. Let him definitely look there if he is nearby. After a while, the protagonist set off and turning around thought, will Harali leave these mountains? Is he finally free? Suddenly a powerful magic beam appeared, and the mentor thought, leave the student's step. He should not be sad about partying. Let him carry a steely determination. With a hesitation, after all, he is the heir to the greatest techniques on this earth. After a while, the man called out to the village chief and said excitedly, this is dangerous. He replied, he must say what he must, even if they are aristocrats. With a serious face, what is the matter? The village chief said. He asks him to pay for the food provided to him and his knights. He threw the coin in with a displeased face and said, that should be enough. Edward thought with a grin. He was probably seeing a ducat for the first time. The headman said excitedly, that was too little. He shouted furiously, what an insolent man he was. He thinks that because he is an aristocrat, he does not know market prices. How dare he deceive a knight? Edward hit him with wild fury. The headman thought, with a displeased face, they are more bandits. The knights, they occupied their house, ate up their supplies, and all this for 1 ducat, and that's without taking into account delivery services and other errands. Stefan suddenly called out to him and asked with a smile, what was the matter? Edward replied that he should not take height to his head. He said with a calm smile, what pathetic peasants they were. That is we. You can't be kind to peasants, they do not know their place at all. After a while, Reinhardt is lying in bed with Cirrus. He asked with a smile, why does she keep caressing him? She replied, Shegus wants to do it. Riefenhar asked what is so attractive about his frail body. Cirrus answered with a smile, his features are so sharp and chiseled like a fine blade. He said, that's how he looked before. But now, at this time, the protagonist looked out the window and said, Cirrus is now about years old. It seems that in human years it is years old. He thought about it now. He is in Chrome, a town south of the kingdom of Vili. She will be sold next year at Theslav auction of Chatan. He asked, with a thoughtful look. What should he do? Maybe should smash this auction to hell and rescue her? No. If he acts recklessly now, it will be difficult for him to restore his magical powers. It is better to solve the money issue for now. Tison thought about it. The price for the elf is simply cosmic, and he is a beggar now, but never mind, he has a powerful body, technicus, and also knowledge of the future. And by the way, on the way to Chan, there are just some ancient ruins. After some time, Stepan called out to Todd and asked, had he not yet found out where those ancient ruins were? He, using the ability, said Lethem, please wait a little longer. Todd, years old, a mage of the Delia Magic Tower, specializing in archaeology. After some time, Stefan looked out the window and asked, is this it? Right? Todd answered, that everything is correct. One famous swordsman is buried here, Claude. At this time, the main character setting off thought this place is day's journey from Crom. He needs to move north to the Hatton Mountains along the sea road. His endurance itself is incredible, so he still doesn't catch a cold. What an amazing body. In general, he heard that a true king of martial arts can walk topless even in winter, but he doesn't want to check artificial return, a special technique of all times, which allows him to resurrect memories in any period of time. He used this ability to return memories of the ancient ruins at the foot of the Hatton Mountains. Even before his regression, there was such a magician, Todd, whom he met in the magic tower of Della, told how he discovered these ruins, together with Stefan in his past life. He himself was there, and he managed to find jewel treasures that Todd's comrades missed. He sold them all for more than gold. This is very profitable. After some time, he saw a populated area in front of him, and said, "This is the village of cattle. So far everything is this." He remembers at this time the villagers asked, what should they do now? They can't even get close to the Valley of Death, but they require a guide. Do they know what will happen if they refuse their offer? Another resident answered, "Even the headman is not in that position now. How tired he is of these vile nobles." Another villager, Sadix, "Let him be quiet, because the others might hear." Ted, holding a bow and arrow in his hands, said that he would go. Him knows the mountains better than anyone in the village, and he also knows that he is the most suitable candidate. His wife and daughter ran up to him and started crying. The villagers started saying he can hand it. Everyone should do what they can do. Ted thought about it now. He didn't want to go even more. Suddenly, the protagonist crashed into the window and said he can go if they don't want to. Ted fearfully aimed at him and asked who he was. Tison answered he was just passing by, and it so happened that he overheard their conversation. He wondered how could one accidentally walk into private property. One of the villagers asked, with a serious face, "Does he know the way well?" The protagonist answered with a smile, "He knows the way very well." He asked, "Is he still volunteering?" Tison answered, "That's right, because he had been there many times before." The man said, "He doesn't know if he knows, but no one who has been to the Valley of Death has ever returned from there. Is he sure of his choice?" The protagonist said with a smile, "He's already been there." He thought, let them just thank him. He's trying for them. The Valley of Death is essentially a dungeon, a relic of the past. The remains of the Silver Era. Years ago, there was a knight from the alien family named Claude. At the age of he was able to awaken the aura. He went through many adventures, and legends about him circulated for a long time throughout the kingdom of Vasily. But fame often breeds arrogance. Claude decided to go to the Valley of Death with only one squire and died. The problem is that the demonic word alien that he took with him remained there. This weapon was the symbol of their family, and was passed down from generation to generation. This sword was searched for almost years. After some time, all the knights set off. The protagonist thought he must be Claude's grandson. LSUS said with admiration, "He is so noble, he doesn't even need a horse as expected from Thebest." Knight Stefan said with a smile, "He is pleased to hear it, even lifts his spirits." Tison thought in bewilderment, this is an elf slave. They are probably having fun with her. There is only one holy warrior in this squad. I think his name is Silin. He looks so young. Does he even know how to use the blessing properly? And in general, is he really a guy? He should try to talk to Todd, but these two are talking about Simithing. Although he talked non-stop even at a young age, what is this atmosphere between them? Wait, can he really feel it? No way. Todd is a cool guy. This definitely can't be. Suddenly Edward called out to him and said, "This is a wise choice." Tison asked, "Does he mean showing the way in truth?" "It's just a trifle," he replied. "That's true, but the villagers were so afraid to take on the task." The protagonist said, "No wonder they were afraid." Edward asked, "What's so scary when they are accompanied by brave Imperial Knights?" The protagonist thought with a displeased face, "Oh, these knights, it seems that there really is no knight in the world who would not be cocky. Hively really does corrupt people." Suddenly a large number of monsters jumped out of the forest. Stefan shouted, "They are under attack. Let everyone get ready." How dare they attack them? People blessed by Seer. Let them listen to the knight's order. Todd used the ability Fire Chain and hit several opponents. This time Silon shouted with a serious face, "Let Lord Fence grant them strength and courage." In an instant, all the knights had a surge of strength. Tison, watching the battle, thought this is not bad, especially this Stefan. He is better than he thought. Well, from the point of view of a magician, of course, but from the point of view of a practitioner of martial arts, they are rather pitiful. Teacher Gerard at least does not brag for no reason. In any casino one pays attention to him. Suddenly a flying monster flew at him, but the protagonist destroyed the enemy with a slight movement of his hand. Tison thought, if the story of Todd's adventures is true, that guy died. Right here, the captain of the expedition from the alien family, Stefan. You can't say that. He is a bad person, but he doesn't really care about his subordinates. Although this is a bad person, Selins goaded. It's dangerous here. Let him hide behind the trees, the protagonist thought with a calm face. This guy would be better. The harpies started to attack him with sharp feathers, but Tisin with a calm face thought he didn't even feel ticklish. Suddenly, one projectile hit him right in the eye, and he screamed in pain. The protagonist destroyed the monster with a slight movement of his hand and asked if he still had tears in him, despite all that hellish pain. Stefan shouted, "Let them report the situation. Are the mages and the saints safe?" Edward answered, "Right, they relive." Tisin asked, "Doesn't he want to know about them?" Stefan shouted, "Nobly the knights of Alien are strong. May the sweetness of victory come to their hearts. Let them rest." The protagonist approached Todd, thanked him with a smile and said he was alive thanks to him. He replied that he hadn't done anything special. Tisan asked if he remembered correctly. He was from the magic Tower of Delhi, right? He had a friend there. His name was Renard. Did he know him? Todd asked. Does that kid have such big friends? He's so sweet and cute. Actually, does he care? The protagonist answered. He's just curious about how he's doing. If everything's okay. Then Todd didn't finish listening and said he's all about studying, cramming all day. Tyson asked, has anything strange happened to him in recent years? Todd answered with admiration. His sharp nose, as always, is at its best, and high sides are like jewels. His skin is soft, the protagonist thought, with disgust. This guy is obsessed with his booty, just like Gerard, only in a slightly different sense. God, what should he do, Mabe? He should beat him to death. Tisan, barely containing his emotions, asked besides that he didn't notice anything in his behavior. For example, Todd answered. Heck, not sure about that. He's not particularly interested in his affairs or thoughts. Suddenly Silin came up to him and asked if he was hurt. The protagonist replied that he was fine. Let him go and examine the orcs. Silin began to treat them, and they said everything was fine. They were not in pain at all. Suddenly a knight called out to him and said, everything was fine with these orcs. They will heal, and that's fine. Why waste your energy on them? Tisan thought even though he was treating them, his kind attitude was more like love for animals. It's about the fundamental values of these people. The path of intelligent races to gaining rights is long and thorny. Suddenly, Stefan called out to Hyman, shouted, let him show the way faster. The protagonist pointed his finger to the side and mockingly said, let them guess straight ahead. Then to the right, there was a pond straight ahead. They would have to slow down a little. Stefan is displeased. What was wrong with his voice? Tisan answered with the same face. Nothing. A few hours later, the knights sat with horror on their faces. First there was a basilisk, then a dark wolf, and more than ogres. Why are there so many monsters nesting on such a tiny mountain? The protagonist thought with a sly smile. Is it because he is deliberately leading them along the most difficult path? He asked if they would like to rest. Stefan shouted furiously. Let everyone get up quickly. Tisan thought. Knights are arrogant and clergymen are two serious magicians on their own minds, and he is a magician to the core. He leads them along shortest path, so they have nothing to present to him. He certainly does not do this in order to burden them. Stefan said with a tired face, so this is it, the place of Sir Claude's death. Who would have known that there are so many monsters here? He climbed onto a rock, and seeing a strange structure in front of him, happily asked, is this it? Edward answered with a smile. Without a doubt, these are the ancient ruins of Paulton. After a while they approached the entrance. Edward said he thinks they can go. Stefan shouted, okay, let them get ready. The protagonist said with a smile, he will wait for them here. He said with a serious face, his work is done. He can go. Tisan said there is no way he can get back to the village by himself. Stefan replied, since he did his job and saw them off, they will protect him on the way back. A great man rests there. Let them respect his wishes. They will find the demonic sword alien. Let the valiant knights go ahead. After they left, the protagonist said with a smile, he will mind his own business for now. He thought right now this place, the ancient ruins of Tan, is completely filled with monsters and spirits. But originally in the Silver Age, was a strategic point and was used as a normal military facility, even if it was once the norm. The technology of the Silver Age can only be envied now, so they are considered quite valuable. Tisan went inside and said he hasn't been here for a long time, really. In the past he studied this place with Cirrus. He remembered how she said that the Sils whisper from here there is a secret passage, right? The protagonist replied. Great job, she really is. His goddess Dison remembered all the depraved deeds and asked, what did he and Cirrus do right in the middle of the danger zone? Yes, Hayes, really. Brave, he put his hand to the wall and thought the key to the entrance is the balance of the seals of water and earth in reverse order. Right, the protagonist said of course he has a cheat sheet up his sleeve, only he lacks mana. So it will be difficult. Why does this body have such a stupid brain? After some time, he opened the secret door and said, finally, everything worked out. It is better for him to take off his jacket for now, and he can't throw away clothes that cost as much as silvers, and now it's time to test the physical capabilities of this body. Suddenly Herod, people screaming, Tison, said in fear. They went that way. Why are the screams coming? From there, if you think about it, a secret passage connects the third floor with the basement. If you open it, it will not be a very nice situation. He thought about it. This is a military structure after all. Activating any device with mana leads to the Lonkov traps designed to scare away uninvited guests. Last time he and Cyrus were here alone, so they did not think about other places, but right now Alston's squad is somewhere there. They probably fell into a trap and fell somewhere in the basement area. How unlucky he is at this time. The knights were fighting a powerful monster. Stefan, seeing the appearance of the enemy, thought fearfully they will not defeat this monster. Is it even possible for a person to defeat such a terrible demon? At this time Silin, sitting near the wounded knight, said, let the great fence illuminate this damaged soul with hishling light in an instant. The knight's wounds began to regenerate, and they thanked him, Silin thought, with a smillianly thanks to them. He himself would be able to survive here. He almost died when the floor under his feet suddenly collapsed. He called out to Todd, thanked him, and said that they survived only thanks to his magical protection. Hare replied that they may have avoided the damage from the fall, but what dangers await them further is unknown. Suddenly, a huge monster came out to them and threw back several knights with one attack. They began to run away. In horror, Anselin, at this time, began to use his ability and shouted, let the great feline crush this durable creature with his pillar of light. Let him grant his slaves unwavering courage. He wondered where is the vaunted courage of the Knights of Al. It is just a waste of muscles. Silence shouted, let the great fence descend upon them, an unbridled wave of courage in an instant. All the warriors under the influence of magic began to scream and ran to attack. Todd wondered in bewilderment how much holy power he poured into them, that they literally became berserkers. Edward shouted with fury, they will show these lower creatures their power. The warriors and monsters clashed in a fierce battle. Todising the ability shouted, let the earth stretch out its hands and reveal what it gave birth to. Suddenly the most powerful pushed him away and hit Lycia. She, bleeding, said that she was useless. At this time, Stefan began to attack and shouted she did a good job. In an instant, he destroyed the most powerful monster. Knights shouted, as expected of their lord. Stefan, with a serious face, shouted let them gather at once. Here fell Sir Claude himself, the greatest knight of the past. Suddenly the ceiling broke under the influence of a powerful blow. A huge fire monster appeared on the horizon. The terrible monster began Tokyo. The knights furiously, Stefan shouted, they themselves decided to go to the end, so let them not disgrace that title of the Knights of Alien, he thought with a serious face. He cannot die like this. He does not want to lose so shamefully. He is the last descendant of the great alien family. He is the only one who has the title of Unshakable. Stefan quickly approached the monster and used the ability Swift Strike, but monster counterattacked. From such a powerful blow, he flew far away. At this time, Silim said, in fear, let the great Philanan crush the vicious creatures with his ray of light. Powerful magical attacks flew into the fire monster. It looked at him with a wild look and attacked with lightning speed. Sudden lithe main character instantly appeared who repelled the attack of the monster. He hit the monster with a slight movement of his hand and defeated it. Tison thought, was that enough for it to die? It's no wonder that he almost died from one real carrier body. The protagonist looked at the defeated knights and said it would be better to move these guys to a safe place. At this time the monsters continued to attack. At this time the monsters continued to attack. Asked in fear, who is this guy? The protagonist with a serious face picked up Elsar in his arms, began to kill the monsters, and said let them not stand in his way. After some time, Stefan woke. Opened, seeing the corpses of the monsters, asked what happened. Edward told him about the protagonist. He asked in surprise. So he is a martial arts master. Stefan approached him and said he could not recognize such a representative warrior can. He find out his name. Tessem began to call the real name but suddenly stopped and thought. Todd knows his clone who is studying in the tower. The protagonist introduced himself as Riffin. Edward thought he heard this name for the first time. If he was so strong, why hadn't he heard of him before? Stefan asked with a smile. Where he was from, Tisan replied that he didn't know himself. He thought in confusion. Was this a common rogue? He assumed he was an aristocrat on his own, but he turned out to be a commoner without any support. Stefan put his hand on his shoulder with a smile and said, it seems he just finished off those they almost finished off, but thanks for his work. Anyway, help never hurts. The protagonist brushed his hand off his shoulder and asked with a serious face, did his brain even work if he assessed the situation like that? They should be speaking. Frankly, they were almost useless. Stefan asked furiously, how dare he? Where is his respect for Thelian family? Edward said excitedly. Let him calm down, commoners, don't know manners. He answered exactly. This was clearly not raised. Does he even remember Woe taught him? Tisan replied. He simply picked up various tricks everywhere. He thought about it. Master Gerard is very famous all over the world. You shouldn't mindlessly mention his name. Besides, he wouldn't want the knight to know about his every move. Stefan said. Such a level of skills for someone who simply pick it up is insane. The protagonist asked. What is the point of this interrogation? Don't they need to take care of the wounded? Edward thought about it. He has such a simple and natural manner of speak. Perhaps he just doesn't realize how arrogant his words sound. Tisan pointed his finger to the side and said, those could definitely use some help. Edward thought about it again. Such a manner is usually characteristic of those who hold a high position and are used to talking to subordinates. He doesn't even take age into account, as if nothing bothers him at all. Maybe this is a member of the royal family from foreign lands, right? It seems he has begun to grasp the nature of his arrogance. His expressions are characteristic of an adult who, like Dersanger. Once suddenly Salone approached the protagonist and asked with admiration, his name is Riffin, right? Houtel is he? Tisan replied. About cm. Heasked with admiration. How much does he weigh? The protagonist replied that he does not know, because he has not weighed himself for a long time. Silan asked with an admiring smile, how did he train Tochi such a body? Tisan answered in bewilderment. He endured beatings, ate, and carried a lot of weights. He said with admiration. He thought. So they say that martial artists never reveal their training methods so easily. The protagonist thought about it. This guy lost his parents early and grew up in an orphanage. In addition, he was often reproached for his cute face and frail body. Maybe deep down he longs to partake of what he cannot get, a healthy body. A low and sonorous voice. That is how he ended up among the monks who torture their bodies to prove their piety. But reality did not live up to his expectations. He never grew up, never matured, and his hair grew too fast. Despite his frail body, he began to train hard in the hopes of surpassing himself, but he could only build up godlike strength, constantly getting injured during training. That's why he is so envious of muscular guys, so that's why he devours him with his eyes, Silan said admiringly. He is so big and handsome, the protagonist said embarrassedly. He will go and look for a way out. He happily replied that he will go with him. Tessin asked. What if someone is injured and he is not around? Stefan said that he will go with him. Let Lesia stay here, and Helf does not mind it, right? The protagonist replied. Let him do as he wants. They headed down the corridor, and the brave knight thought, even if it was an accident, he cannot help but acknowledge it. The country bumpkin helped him. That's a fact, and in general helping knights would be an honor for him, although the way he commands freely suggests that he looks down on knights. He's just an insolent bastard. They'll see what he does when the demons show up. He'll show off his power and put him in his placia. Can't wait for the demons to show up. The protagonist hit the sore spot with lightning speed and knocked the knight out, saying that they were almost there. Let him take a nap. Suddenly monsters appeared and were rapidly walking towards him. Tisan easily killed them and said that since all the interference was gone, it was time for him to look at Thetrisher. He entered the room and, examining the jewelry, said that this was excellent Woozer gold from the Silver Age. It should be around here somewhere. He found it. It was a bottomless bag, a magical artifact that allows you to carry times more items than this bag can hold. The weight is also reduced by Timeston, with a sly smile collecting things in a bag, said. He also found a heavenly brazier, a blade of return, and a magic sapphire. This is a whole ton of expensive loot. After some time, Stefan woke up and asked what happened. The protagonist answered he was hit right in the back of the head and immediately lost consciousness. The knight thought with displeasure. Why is everything going wrong today? He reluctantly thanked him for his help. Tisan, with a sly smile, said no need for thanks. He thought about it while the protagonist was digging up artifacts. He had to hit Stefan 3 more times, collecting things. He thought he didn't hit him again, right? Tisan said, however. This knight would have stayed in chocolate for the rest of his life in this case, so who cares? Stefan woke up again and thought with displeasure. It was strange because he was vigilant, but he couldn't notice anything at all. Couldn't be his fault. He should have a proper meal when he got back, the protagonist thought with a smile. The bag was overflowing. He would come back for the remaining loot another time. Tisan said it seemed like they had looked at everything here, so they should go back after a while. The entire army set off. Silan called out to the protagonist with a smile and asked, "Is he by any chance a prince?" Tisan replied that he was just an ordinary citizen. He asked, "Is he just an ordinary one? But he is so capable." The protagonist asked, "Is it really so rare for ordinary citizens to be outstanding?" S replied, "It's not that. It's just that." Comes off speaking in a condescending manner. Too naturally, he understands that he is self-confident, being a martial artist, and he can afford to boss, even Sir Stefan around, but to speak like that to Edward, who is over years old. Tezen thought, right, he's only in this life, he should be more careful, he said. Thoth just rarely met people on his way, so he forgot his manners. They came to a huge door, and a huge monster appeared behind it. The main character thought, is this GR? What is he doing here? He dozed. Meeting this monster here, Stefan started to take out his sword, and said, who would have thought that this place is such a guard? Tisan thought, now everything is clear. It's just that no one has taken care of him yet. He said that they should go back. Their forces cannot cope with this monster. One of the knights shouted in horror. Let the chief look at the sword in the hands of this monster. Stefan said in surprise, this is the demonic sword alien. Edward is in fear. He doesn't think to fight this monster, does he? The chief asked. Isn't it obvious? He shouted excitedly. It's too dangerous now that they have figured out who their enemy is. They better return to the manor and prepare for battle properly. Stefan shouted aggressively. What is he saying? Can't he see that the great knight's sword has been defiled? He thought with a serious face, he can't retreat. He will take the sword from him at any cost, the leader shouted. Even if this sword is in the hands of the Grimry Reaper, let the knights take up arms. Tisan thought with a serious face, what a foolish he was. He thought, inside the spatial rift, in the ruins of the Silver Edge, there is a system for automatically correcting the system's flaws. That is, when the system fails, a defense astrogard that absorbs supernatural monsters. In other words, the entities guarding the dungeons quietly live their lives until the system kidnaps them to use as guards. Moreover, the creature absorbed by the system becomes more formidable thanks to it. In front of them is the same demon who defeated Claude, who owned the aura. If the level of this man is higher than that of ordinary Taggle before him, he becomes the guardian of the dungeon, and usually has otherworldly powers. Stefan shouted with a serious face, this monster is Chanathi, are not so timid as to be afraid of a tied-up opponent. Tisan asked, do they really intend to fight this monster? They have no chance, they will all die. Edward said he is grateful to him for his help, but he is only a barbarian who does not know the honor of a knight. There are things in this world worth risking your life for. The protagonist thought they were not even close to him. Edward ran to the attack and shouted, let all the knights put their lives on the line. Let them show what they are worth, Tisan thought. In bewilderment, they cannot even defeat the Taggle. How are they going, Tokyo? This monster at this time, Silan bowed his head and shouted, may the blessing of the goddess be with them. The knights began to attack the monster, but it began to kill them with ease. The protagonist said he told you it wouldn't work. Here comes another corpse. Flying, he wondered, do they really like it when all the bad stuff is knocked out of them? Stefan shouted, "Let them not lose heart, they are the Knights of Alt. Even this demon is afraid of their courage." Tison thought he already understood how stupid this main warrior is. No matter what they tell him, he won't listen, sir. Edward seemed relatively sane. He thought that at least he would understand, but he is trying to help Stefan defeat Jest. The main knight flutters like a butterfly and stings like a bee-all-thotto. Be honest with him. He barely scratched the monster. Sillin shouted again at this time. Let Fian turn her Sicard staff on this evil entity. Let her release her sacred staff. In an instant, a magical attack flew at the monster's head. At this time, Lesia deftly dodged and struck. Stefan shouted that she was doing well. Tison thought so. This has such anim. She is quite talented, even better than Edward. He would have singled her out as number 2 in this squad. Did Hirali underestimate them at this time? Todd began to use the technique and shouted, "Let the cold of the northern winds swirl in his hands." In an instant, a powerful snowstorm headed towards the monster. Suddenly, the chains to which the monster was chained broke. A system window appeared, which said the current defense system is overloaded. The second phase is being activated. The monster jumped and crushed several knights. Stefan jumped on this creature, but the monster hit him and he fell to the ground. At this time, Lesia tried to dodge its attack and strike, but the monster caught her and created a huge fire volley which was directed towards Silent. Protagonist instantly found himself in front of him and took the fire volley. Tison apologized with a serious face and said he was thinking for a bit and couldn't react in time. He thought, can he handle Gist honestly? He himself is curious. What is the limit of his current strength? Can martial arts help at all? In the fight against a demon when he was a mage, he never took risks. If the chances of winning were small, but now he is a warrior, he gets goosebumps at the sight of a strong opponent. This is a feeling that he never experienced in his past life. Tison shouted he has come a long way and has become a strong warrior. The master would like this. He used the ability of the chi bullet in thought. Drod always said, if he doubts, let him just strike first. The monster attacked and slightly grazed him. The protagonist looked at the wound and thought, this body can easily dodge an ordinary sword, but the demonic one could scratch him. Monster kicked him with lightning speed, and Tison flew into the wall. Sillin, excitedly, called out his name. The protagonist, covered in aura, said, with a serious face, that he was fine. Sillin wondered in surprise. Is this the power-off aura? Tison thought, if he had held the blow, he would have had a chance to counterattack the endless beatings. Oft mentor took their toll. Dodging became a habit, while he will take advantage of the opportunity to policy his technique. The monster began to scream fiercely. The protagonist, preparing an attack, shouted. He did not understand anything, but the battle begins. They clashed in a fierce fight. Stefan, surprised, watching what Washoponing, wondered how a lowly commoner could own an aura, when even he, an aristocrat, still could not awaken it. He shouted in horror. Who is this guy? What kind of monster is he? The protagonist. The knight frowned in fear and wondered what kind of person this was. The protagonist swung his fist and dealt a powerful blow. Riefenhardt dodged the enemy's attack. The guy grinned and felt what incredible strength he had managed to develop over all this time. With one blow, the young man tore off the monster's arm. Thiedmann's eyes lit up. The guardians of the ruins did not fall even after serious injuries, because the dungeon endlessly pumped mana into them. Waves of energy ran through the body of the beast. The monster opened its mouth and spewed flames. The warrior lunged forward to dodge. The martial artist grabbed the enemy by the arm to practice at the hold. The protagonist kicked the monster in the face. He grinned and dealt a series of blows. Riefenhardt, his eyes burning, beat the enemy. The soldiers watched their fight from the side. Squinting, the boy realized Thoth had gotten carried away and thought about using the Horn of Disaster to finish it all off in one go. Its hoof. The boy realized that he couldn't use his skill, because otherwise the whole place would collapse. Thurier gritted his teeth when Todd asked him to use his sword and cover it with aura. The fighter turned around and shouted that he didn't know how to do it. The man asked what that meant. The martial artist frowned and said that heckled only cover the body with aura, because that was the teaching of their clan. Sillin opened his mouth wide and called out to him, holding back the paws of the monster. The protagonist turned around. The boy remembered that his body had high durability. Reifenhart gritted his teeth and confirmed it. The saint put his fingers together and decided to cast a binding. The boy opened his eyes wide as the blessing of Filamentons fell on his body. The boy clenched his teeth in tension. He managed to throw the monster over himself. The warrior released its paws and threw it aside. The fighter grabbed his hand and realized that his comrade had used a divine spell not on an object, but on a human body. The healer closed his eyes and asked his friend to beat this monster to death. The martial artist ran forward to quickly finish this. He kicked the monster in the jaw. Then the protagonist hit it with his knees. Reifenhart swung his fist furiously. During the attack, a huge amount of energy burst out of him. The demon's body flew into the air. An explosion of aura was heard. One blow tore the monster into pieces. The wizard blushed when he saw his friend who had just won. Mana flowed under the ceiling. Suddenly, her chain went out. Sillin opened his mouth in surprise and asked if that was all. The boy asked him to quickly remove the spell. Stefan then approached him, gritting his teeth. The boy claimed that their guide was doing a good job of hiding his identity and asked if they were really that insignificant to him. The commander looked at him from under his brows and said that he would never forgive him for trampling on his honor and suggested that he was enjoying watching their fight from the sidelines. The boy narrowed his eyes and denied this, and thought that it meant that he cared about what was happening, but that was not the case. The warrior turned away silently, and the captain asked how he dared to turn his back on him. The knight wanted to attack him, but the fighter ducked and raised the demonic sword. Stefan suddenly tripped and was unable to stay on his feet. The boy rolled down the rubble of the dungeon. The commander gritted his teeth and decided that the guide had dodged on purpose. Raising the sword, the martial artist said that he was not trying to mock him and asked him to take what they came for. The captain grabbed the demonic sword. Edward was surprised that this man was so careless with such a precious thing, and said that such are the privileges of the truly strong. The protagonist raised his eyebrows and thought that this weapon was second-ass compared to the one he usually used. Thekatane frowned furiously. Reifenhart suggested returning to the village because there was nothing else to see here. The village of cattle was illuminated by the rays of the sun. Silin brought his hands to the baby to heal him. The boy donated a few coins to the villagers. The guy was surprised at how he knew how to do business, and decided that it was a very profitable investment. Considering what kind of image would now be attached to the sacred order of Filanets, the cavalry rode along the riverbank. Sitting on his horse, Stefan said that they should find out who this man was. Edward agreed with him. The commander frowned sternly and decided that it was impossible for a commoner to be stronger than him. The young man walked up the hill. The warrior smiled broadly and said that he would now meet Cirrus. The fighter looked back and asked why the saint continued to follow him. The healer approached him and told him that there were priests who traveled the world and showed him the grace of God. The martial artist replied that they were called pilgrims. The wizard clenched his fists and explained that he wanted to return to the Holy Order, but he wanted to try himself in the role of a pilgrim. Sillin blushed and added that he would like to be in the company of the strongest of men. The protagonist remembered that Gerard had a similar look and hoped that these still looked at people differently. Frowning, Reifenhart wondered why there were so many strange people around. Hyman wished that the boy would understand him and leave. The saint's eyes sparkled. The boy mentally compared him to a walking first aid kit. Closing his eyes, the young man decided that the healer would not interfere, and said that it was his choice whether to follow him or not. Walking along the hill, Thruzard asked how he managed to train his abs so much. The warrior replied that he simply pulled blocks of ice and received it in less blows from the mentor. At night, darkness fell on the city. A dim light illuminated the corridor of the palace. Someone asked how they even conducted the instructions. The man bowed and apologized to the master. Beret opened his mouth wide and said that elves must be faithful to their owners and give themselves to them with both soul and body. The heir of the syndicate put Hishans on his belt and was indignant that his slave was so ignorant. The girl replied that she was born that way. The scoundrel said that her look was irritating. The woman lowered her head and explained that she had such eyes from birth. The nobleman approached a Danathor elf and ordered his subordinate to buy him a normal slave, because this one was defective. Cirrus put her hand to her chest. She was being returned to the slave market for the third time. A map of the area appeared. The Theprincipality of Chatahan, an entire nation of traders, was located in the very north of the continent. Next to it was the Jura River, thanks to which trade flourished in this corner of the world. Not far away was the capital Zeppelin, the heart of the trade routes. Carts were traveling along the road. Walking along the street, Scylla noticed that everyone here was very busy. The protagonist explained that this was a country founded by traders who bought lands from the Kingdom of Graim. Rafart frowned confidently and decided that Cirrus must be somewhere here. The boy asked if they could slow down a little. The heroes saw how some nobleman was beating up a local. Trick opened his mouth wide and accused him of slandering the Roof Fame Trading Association. The old man covered his head with his hands. The man threw a handful of coins at him and decided that this should be enough for blows. The saint ran up to the poor man and asked if he was okay. The healer said that they needed to contact the police. The townsman began to collect the coins and replied that there was no need for that because such money will even help him start his own business. The wizard opened his mouth in surprise and asked if he was really going to act as if nothing had happened to him just because of money. The boy reminded him that everyone here was crazy about money. The old man ran away. Scylla realized that he had never been to such a place. The young man told him that here, you can even buy your way out of prison if you have enough money. The boy frowned and asked what business his friend could have in such a city. Thuarir crossed the bridge and explained that he needed to buy something. The saint asked what, exactly. The fighter narrowed his eyes and said that he wanted to buy an elf. The saint covered his chest with his hands and asked what was wrong with him. The martial artist said that it was not what it seemed. The healer quickened his pace and expressed dissatisfaction with the behavior of men. The protagonist thought about not being able to tell him about his past life. Rafart looked at his companion and said that he was actually a man too. The wizard confirmed this with disappointment. There was a sign in the form of a teapot on the building, sitting in a chair. TK asked if the Rain Trading Association was deceiving merchants and concluded that they were accusing them only to get money. The elves surrounded him. Beret entered the room. The man said that they had not seen each other for a long time and asked what happened to the slave he bought recently. The syndicate heir grinned and realized he couldn't get away from this conversation and replied that he had returned her 2 weeks ago because she hadn't listened to him at all. The head of the trade union asked him with his mouth wide open if he couldn't tame even a slave and said it wasn't surprising that Karen couldn't even make it into the top. Taking a sip of tea, the merchant wanted to see his friend's face when he managed to tame this girl and decided to visit Elftenheim. Clouds were floating above city. The protagonist's mouth dropped open in amazement, and he asked what his companion was doing. Trying to do push-ups, Scylla replied that he was training, and Refenhard wondered why he had no muscles at all after all that training. The boy asked him not to push himself too hard, and the boy sat down on the floor and said that everything will be fine. The young man frowned when he saw a bright light. The saint smiled sheepishly. The warrior reset his eyebrows in confusion and realized why his friend wasn't gaining muscle mass. Imagining a pocket watch, the fighter remembered that healing magic was like turning back time, and muscles grew from microdamage and subsequent regeneration. The healer closed his eyes. The martial artist realized that he was returning his muscles to their original state when he healed himself. The wizard looked at him and asked if something was wrong. The protagonist replied that everything was fine and promised to show him a more effective mid a little later. Reifenhart asked if his long hair didn't interfere with his training. Scylla smoothed his hirond, explained that it grew back very quickly anyway. Heading towards the exit, the boy said that he now had no money and said that he needed to go to the slave market. The boy shouted that he would go with him. As he imagined the shackled creatures, the young man thought that there were all sorts of slaves being sold at this auction, but the most popular were the elves. The warrior imagined elves and orcs of different ages and categories, each with their own price. Sitting on the couch, the fighter remembered that another reason for their popularity was their lifespan, and that their adolescence lasted longer than usual. The saint told him that this place had its own year history. The martial artist frowned and decided that calling slave market an elven paradise was very low. The healer said that he had never been to such a place before. Uizard blushed and suggested that the elves were treated better than the orcs. The protagonist explained that both wear slave contracts and asked if they would like that. Sillin raised his eyebrows and wondered if life under the tutelage of more civilized people was not better than living in the wilderness. Reifenhart narrowed his eyes and realized that this was exactly what the average person thought. Looking ahead, the boy realized that people's mentality could not be changed so easily and decided that he needed to found a new kind of empire, different from the one in the past. The man entered the room and apologized for keeping the customer waiting. The elves smiled seductively. The boy closed his eyes in embarrassment. The merchant decided that this was too much for her and wondered why he would take the girl to such a place. Covering his face with his hand, the young man was outraged by the forest fare's fall so low and asked if there were any dark-skinned slaves among them. The merchant called his taste rather peculiar. The warrior turned away and said that he did not mean that at all. The saint asked if he himself had not said anything about the harm of slavery, raising his hand. The man said that they had one darkened slave and asked the customer to follow him. The heroes went out into the corridor. The young girls were doing gymnastics. The merchant explained that they were all receiving a-prepare education so that they would always be in demand. Other women were cooking. The merchant added that they were fed only fresh nuts, fruits, and vegetables because proper nutrition helps them smell good. Frowning menacingly, the fighter said that he did not need all these stories and asked him to simply take them to the darkened elf. The man awkwardly turned away. He approached the guards and said that he needed room. In the room, slaves were fighting each other. The merchant explained that this was a training hall where they were trained to become assassins. The merchant closed his eyes and said that among them was the product that his client was interested in. The martial artist began to cry. Cirrus clenched, her teeth in anger. The girl swung a rolled-up paper. In the castle laboratory, the protagonist was pouring liquid from one flask to another. Cirrus grabbed his hand, warning Sir Reinhardt that they should not be mixed, and he asked in confusion what she was talking about. An explosion thundered over the castle, and the elf screamed that the king himself could see that it was exploding, and asked who would mix fire flowers with stone seeds. But the man looked at his beloved in confusion, asking for forgiveness. That it seemed he was simply distracted by something, and she was indignant that yesterday he said the same thing, and it once again ended in an explosion. Wiping the old man's face with a handkerchief, the elf mentally wondered why he was so cute, even at such a mature age. And out loud, she asked him not to move. His whole face was dirty. Looking tenderly at his beloved, the king asked how long she would call him Sir Reichenhard. Asked her to call him as usual, and she said that she could not. The girl looked down with a sad smile, who asked her both reasons. The palace was engulfed in flames. The king went out onto the balcony. Behind him, his loyal conscripts knelt. The orc bowed his head and said that he had come to greet his lord for the last time. Turning around, the old men called their names and asked what was wrong with their faces, as if they had seen someone on the brink of a grave for the first time. Looking again at the burning castle, the man assumed that in total 1,000,000 soldiers had gathered from all over the continent to crush Thiedman King, the scourge of humanity. Perhaps all of humanity's fighting power had accumulated here. The crowd of soldiers moved forward, and the king asked how they would deal with the consequences. Their countries were completely incapacitated, and all for the sake of one fight. To which the orc explained to his lord that the enemies did not even allow themselves to think about accepting our right to exist. Looking darkly at the ruler, the warrior asked if he wanted to go with them. But old man replied that that was the point, that they could only leave because he would stay here. The wind ruffled the man's hair, and he asked Adolphus to accept his apology. Even with the divine guarantee, he had lost everything. To which the dwarf reminded him that it was not a guarantee, but a prophecy. But the hero called it the same thing. Keep the elf close by Willith the orc paves the way. The one who can pass the Diamond Man abyss and tear down the Horko pillar will soon appear. So follow him. He will change your fate and grant you salvation. The king closed his eyes and remembered that he was very suppressed. He had only destroyed some shrine, and the dwarves suddenly proclaimed him a savior. He did not understand what was happening at all. The protagonist took a few steps along the balcony and the old man expressed hope that the day would come and they would meet again. Alpa would give, he replied, that he hoped for it too, wished them a safe journey, and asked them Totri to survive. Cirrus turned around and the man reminded her that it was time for her to go too, and she said that she would wait for Mr. Reifenhardt. Looking at his beloved, the king said that no one knew what fate had prepared for him if something happened to him. He hoped that she would be able to find a worthy partner, but she objected that, as Shay had said, she would wait for him. The old man's gaze became confused. He tried to remind her of the situation, but the elf shouted that she would wait for him. A surprised look crossed with a determined one. The lovers embraced. In the present, Cirrus fought with all her might, until the slave trader honestly admitted that he was ashamed to show her to customers. She was completely luntable, a defective product. She had already been returned 3 times. The elf parried the blow of 2 blades at once, while the seller continued that she was skilled, but her character was so terrible that there was simply no demand for her. She was so difficult to sell that he began to use her to train other elves. After all, they had to experience real combat before becoming full-fledged killers. The man looked at the protagonist and clarified whether he was still interested in buying, and he confirmed this. Rubbing his palms, the merchant concluded that the guy definitely had perverted tastes and decided to demand 100 more. Perverts are always on their own, Wavend said out loud that the buyer would owe gold. Sillin looked at the man in surprise and noted that was very cheap, to which he repeated that the product was defective and admitted that he was not sure he should sell it. The elf looked at Reifenhardt and asked if he was the new master. Frowning, the young man tried to mentally understand how much this girl had suffered that she had so many scars. The hero took off his jacket, and the slave trader offered to call a priest to mend her wounds, but he replied that it was not necessary and asked his companion to help, throwing the jacket over the girl's shoulders. The warrior asked her to put this on for now, since it was get cold outside, and asked if she had a name. She answered that she did not. Wrapping a scarf around the elf's neck, the guy suggested the name Cirrus, heard in response that she understood, and when asked if she liked her, she simply stated that she would remember. The young man buttoned the slave's jacket and said that from now on her full name was Cyrus Valencia. She reminded him thought a slave was not given a last name and asked if it was his last name, and he replied that no, it was her personal last name, and it was not worth forgetting it. With a smile, Reifenhardt gave his name and introduced his companion. Raising an eyebrow, the elf again replied that she understood. The same day, the slave trader looked at Theklian in shock and replied that if he was talking about number, then it had already been purchased. Trick's face turned gray with anger when the man added that it had been sold about an hour ago. Frowning with displeasure, the fat man assumed that it was Beret who realized that he was planning to buy the elf back. The merchant threw up his hands and said that it was not so. Thebir was a young man he had never seen before, and when asked his name, he replied that he had paid in cash, so he did not ask. With his hands on his hips, the head of the trade association asked, who would carry so much cash to afford an elf slave? And the man explained that it was not as if the price for the elf was standard. After all, it was a low-quality product. The slaver remembered the face of the client when the fat man asked for a description of him, and said that he was a young man of strong build. One could immediately understand how he would see him. At this time, the newly made Cirrus looked at her new outfit in surprise. Rubbing his chin, Reifenhardt decided to make do with this for now, and a little later, fueled by her better equipment. On the street, the protagonist turned to the girl and asked if she wanted to eat, and she replied that she would follow the will of the master. He added that she could not call him master, to which he heard the question of whether he would her back. The elf looked at the new master in confusion, and when he objected that he did not mean this, she had thought about what was happening with this man. First, he wrapped her in a cloak, then bought her good clothes, treated her like an ordinary human. Girl Dot, smiling at his interlocutor. The warrior explained that he wanted to say that she could treat him as a comrade with whom they traveled together. No need to call him master, better by name. Frowning, the elf mentally decided that these were such role-playing in games. Apparently, this pervert, just like the role of an adventurer, continuing to move after the new master, the girl mentally added Thathis, favorite type of game was to save the beauty like a hero, and out loud agreed to call him Rife. Eating a large portion with appetite, the girl thought that all people were the same. Putting down his fork, the young man said that he heard rumors that Rodante's Grace was the most popular restaurant in Zeppelin. They used the name of the goddess, known as the patroness of a bountiful harvest who gave food. One could say that they had communion with the flock. Taking a bite of a bun, Silene clarified, didn't communion imply free food? And the hero asked him to stop, as if the cult of finance did not make money on beauty services. Raising an eyebrow, the boy noted that, of course, she was the goddess of love and beauty. This did not contradict the canons of his religion. The warrior said that he heard that one service costs a heap of gold, and he was forced to admit that this was true. But when Saren suddenly grabbed the lobster's tail with her hand, the saint fell silent. The elf froze when she saw their looks, after which she grabbed a fork, realizing that she had forgotten herself. The young man looked at her thoughtfully, not understanding why she didn't like it. He had brought her here to honor the memory of their first anniversary. The girl wiped her mouth with a napkin, and the warrior thought that then he had appeared before her as a savior, and now she saw him as a customer. The first meeting was Capabluff, causing completely opposite impressions. Maybe he should have come later. After some time, walking through Bizarro, continuing to think that sooner or later, his beloved would understand the meaning of his words. Anthus suited him. The merchant presented his goods, and said that they were the best in his store. They would not find anything like this anywhere else. And Riefenhart asked the elf how she was, and whether there was anything useful. The girl took the rapier, and the hero was surprised by the choice. Didn't she usually use a saber? The warrior turned around, abruptly, not understanding how the man knew. But the boy noted that it was true that martial artists could tell who was using what weapon just by looking at their hands. Soon, a saber was hanging from the girl's belt. And the saint remarked that he never thought he would ever have the Mithra-based weapon he had dreamed of. The boy showed off his new dagger, and the boy Eskedwi, a priest, needed a weapon at all. Suddenly, something caught Riefenhart's attention. He saw people he didn't know moving toward them. One of the men stepped forward and asked if he could have a word with the protagonist. The boy frowned. He asked what was going on. With a calm face, the stranger said that a famous aristocrat wanted to get this elf. The girl glanced at him, looking menacingly at the interlocutor. The protagonist asked, "So what?" Bowing, holding out the letter, the man explained that the buyer was ready to offer a reasonable price for the slave. If desired, they could replace her with another of higher quality, and asked to read it. Towering over the messenger, the guy replied that he was not interested. He clarified whether to take this as a refusal, and heard confirmation. Frowning, the man assumed that the warrior did not understand. He said that his master offered you a reasonable price. Beginning to get angry, the hero objected that he did not understand and repeated that he was not interested. Turning around, the messenger concluded that the interlocutor was stubborn, and in this case, he left him no choice, assuming that he was attracted to this elf. The young man put his hands on his hips and wondered out loud what business it was of this man. But the young priest found him funny. That same evening, in the mention of the head of the trade guild, TK frowned and asked why his subordinate had returned empty-handed. Bowing, the Mon explained that a fool would not sell her regardless of the price. He had very naive ideas about this world. To which Fat Man barked that he should have just smeared it and sprinkled coins on top, to which he objected that there were too many eyes there, and decided it was better to adhere to the norms of decency. Grinning, Ramon said that he wanted to wait for the Reichens to steal this elf, and then they would say that she was dead, and offered double the price. This slave was selling for a pittance anyway, so it would be keep. With a satisfied smile, the head of the trading association admitted that it was tempting, and allowed him to take Sir Lantis with him. He was hanging around, doing nothing anyway. It was time to start earning his bread. The next morning at the inn, a scattering of gold coins lay on the bed. Folding his arms over his chest, Riefenhart reflected that he had stocked up on gold pieces, which seemed like more money than he thought, though it was not much considering his plan to found a new empire. Looking at the coins, he figured that it would be worthwhile to try investing them instead of carrying all this weight around. for nothing. Visualizing a map of the surrounding lands in his mind, Harry remembered that a famine would break out in the kingdom of Croins in the near future. A landowner country where, thanks to the fertile soil and bountiful harvest bestowed by the earth goddess Rena, they had never stocked up for famine. Rubbing his chin, the young man mentally added that next spring the famine would bring a wave of deaths and horrific images of parents eating their own children. Folding into grain now seemed a wise choice. Frowning, the warrior thought about the first trading unions that came to mind were Raw Fine, Carrion, and Tan. First of all, he was not going to invest in the first one no matter what, because its founder was Aperverd, who had bullied Cirrus in his past life. If he had to choose between the other two, he would give Preferencito, the third largest union, which specialized in grain sales, and was Rein's main competitor, the Tane Trading Union. Civil rubbed the back of his head, muttering about the damn Rowleen, which decided to sell millet at half-price. He did not care about the generally accepted norms at all, and he was still the second largest trading union on the continent. At this rate, they themselves would lose all their partners. It was necessary to consider all incoming offers for exchange as soon as possible in order to resolve the situation. At that moment, one of the employees entered the office and informed the head of the association that he had a visitor who said he wanted to make an investment, and he replied that a small amount of money would not solve their problems now. It would only add to the hassle, and asked to send him away. The man's face expressed shock when he was told that the client was offering 1,500 gold. Riefenhardt, smiling contentedly, said that he wanted to invest his money in grain. Folding his arms across his chest, he asked his interlocutor to fill his warehouses in the kingdom of Croins for the barley harvest next spring, and then asked again about the kingdom. Looking at the young man with a puzzled expression, the head of the association reminded him that selling grain to Croven was like trying to sell soap to an orc, to which he replied that even an orc would wash himself as soon as he got used to it, and when asked what he was talking about, he replied then nothing. The man looked at the client with irritation when he said that in any case it would be his problem and they would make a profit no matter what. So why not? He replied that he did not dare to offer clients to invest in a knowingly failing business. He offered to look at other offers. Squinting, the guy threatened that if the head did not want to do this, he would just go and invest in another trade union, and he asked him to stop. Looking at the bags of gold in confusion, the man admitted that his business was going through hard times now. But with this investment, they would easily survive and even succeed. He just wanted to offer a more profitable investment. Frowning, the hero remembered that this man had been adamant in his past life too, and said out loud that it was his money, so he would decide where to invest it himself. Just let him draw up a contract and be quick about it. Approaching the interlocutor's face, the guy asked to tell him only one thing: not to use his contribution for personal purposes, and he frighteningly muttered that, of course. When one of the employees brought the papers, the warrior asked again if there was a branch of the Tan Trading Association in the Kingdom of Graham, and the head replied that yes, they were just building a trade route to the northern regions. Folding his arms across his chest, the young man asked if there was a branch near the Delia Magic Tower, and hearing in response that no, but the route to the Ronto branch passed through Delphia, asked to get some information for him. The hero looked away when he was asked what exactly and the head of the association would look. Since contacting the branch was not a problem, he mentally decided to take the opportunity to find out what was going on with his body. At this time, Surinth Company of Sun was training in the courtyard of the inn. She made a decisive swing with her dagger and then again and again under the surprised gaze of the boy. The elf moved easily and freely. The girl remembered her mother's face, who told her that high elves were originally imprisoned to be guardians of the forest. The woman stroked her daughter's head, continuing that they lived in eternal grace under the protection of the world tree of Elfenheim. Every living creature, Wasteire, friend, and the trees provided them with food, and although people oppressed them, put them in a miserable position, one day, Alita would show them all the way to paradise. The elven city was engulfed in flames, and the mother kept saying that they were all heirs of the great fairy, and asked her beloved daughter to never forget her pride. The little girl looked at the fire in horror. An elf, in a peasant dress, told the future Surin that she would soon go to a better place because she was pretty. From now on, she had to learn to be loyal and polite, as a good elf should. A fat man beat the girl with a club. She sat in a cold basement. Looking ahead, the little elf realized that even her own kind mocked her. Her purebird heritage only gave them more reasons to mock her. Only the sword saved her these days. Continuing her training, the girl remembered that all the adults she knew wielded a sword. They fought bravely and died with honor. That's why she loved this weapon so much. Swinging the sword, she recalled the image of her parents, who fought fiercely for their lives. Saren longed forward. Tears welled up in her eyes because time passed, and the memories faded. But she forever kept this phrase deep in her heart. My beloved daughter, never forget about pride. At that moment, applause rang out. Beaming with delight, Sylin admitted that it was cool, and could not understand how she moved like that. The elf looked at Thebu in surprise, and replied that she just needed to try her best. To which he said that she had exactly the same instructions from the Rafini. We're all warriors like that. But she didn't think so. Making lunges with his fists. He asked him piously if he was doing the right thing. And then he turned around when he heard a strange voice saying, "Here she is." A crowd of people purred in the arch, and the one standing in front said that the elf would go with them. Ramon said with a grin that he would take the slave to Hariel. Master. Siren frowned. Trix people entered the courtyard of the inn. The boy stepped forward and asked who they were. Closing his eyes, the scoundrel said that he didn't even think that someone would come to help. They had already taken the nest from Amirs, to which the young priest reminded him that it was said that the elf was not for sale. Why this coercion? The man grabbed the sword and swung it at the boy, yelling that he was incredibly loud for such a snot. But the warrior parried the blow with her dagger. Then she cut the attacker's throat, and the rest of the fighters immediately rushed at her. But she easily slipped between the attackers. With a cold look, the elf attacked the men. Roman's face was distorted with anger. He wondered how the slave dared. Looking at the girl's figure, he thought that she was very strong. At this time, the saint folded his hands in a prayer gesture and loudly called out 2 deer filanets, so that she would crush these enormouses with her iron rod. The next moment, the warrior had to save the boy from an attack. A sword stuck into Atreid. He looked at the weapon in horror while the leader of the squad who threw it clarified that if the pilgrim dies, no one will blink an eye, right? The saints. The face was distorted with anger, but the girl stopped him. And when he asked what this freak was talking about, she said that everything was fine. The elf moved forward, twirling a dagger in her hands, and Selen called her name. She pointed the dagger at the enemies, and with a confident smile, she said that it was not a problem. The man clenched his teeth. Turning around, he said that Tata had to get to work. A tall orc approached Ramon. The warrior narrowed her eyes. The orc warrior said that he was working and would catch the elf. Looking gloomily at the warrior, the orc apologized, explaining everything by such fate, essentially offering Torazine herself to it. Looking gloomily at the new opponent, Siren figured that he was much stronger than these people. Would she be able to handle it? The warrior rushed forward, and the owner reminded him not to even think about damaging the goods. To which he replied that he would not, and would simply grab her. The girl covered herself with Adager from the first blow, and her eyes widened when the enemy abruptly changed the trajectory of the attack. At the last moment, the elf dodged the sword. The blade formed vortices of wind. Gritting her teeth, the warrior realized it thought the enemy was indeed strong. Trying to attack the orc, the girl realized that she should not have left the Saber in the room. She tried to attack from above in a jump, but the enemy covered himself with a blade. Ramon became furious and shouted, "What is the warrior doing? Couldn't he even cope with an elven girl?" Frowning, the big guy concluded that it seemed that today he would not be allowed to eat again. Leaving dents in the pavement, the orc furiously attacked the girl. She clenched her teeth again. The warrior swung his sword. The elf looked at him amazingly. The big guy was confused. The girl ran right under the blade. Resolutely looked at the enemy, while the blade was lowered on her. Her gaze seemed icy. The orc realized that the warrior was not dodging. Perhaps something was wrong here. The big guy had to abruptly take the weapon away, and a smile flashed across the warrior's face. Then she struck his neck with a dagger, gritting his teeth. The warrior realized he had almost killed her and tried to figure out what she would have done if he hadn't changed his trajectory. And the elf thought she believed he would make it in time. Saren turned around when she heard the boy scream, asking if she could block throne blades, and she answered that she probably could. Putting his hands together again in prayer, the saint shouted that he believed in her. Ramon swung his throwing knife, cursing at the boy. The weapon flew at the young priest, and the man reminded him that he had told him to stand still. But an elf flew out in front of the praying Sillin. She blocked the flying dagger with her own. At that moment, the figure of his deity appeared above the priest's figure, while he asked Saint Felinans to crush these bastards with all her might. Thrower opened her mouth. However, the villain did too. An iron rod fell right on the opponents. The blow raised a cloud of dust over the courtyard of the inn. The boy ran, shouting that, although divine power was meant to fight Demonsand, the living dead, it would help them buy time, which meant they had to run quickly. And the elf understood. Grabbing the saint by the belt, she called his name. Then she threw the dagger. The blade pierced the wall. Through warrior's foot rested on the blade. Then she used it as a springboard for a jump. Pressing the boy to herself, the elf jumped into the window, breaking the glass. Pointing his finger at the window, the villain ordered Talcat to quickly follow. Then the man turned around when he asked if they had screwed up again. Because of one elf, they had caused such a rout, to which the leader of the squad justified himself by saying that she was stronger than he thought. The old man grinned and noted that Evental had failed to grab the girl, how the slave had fought on equal terms with an experienced orc warrior. Sir Lantis placed his hand on the hilt of his sword and concluded that it was his turn, and asked where the target had disappeared to. As soon as the scoundrel pointed in the direction, the swordsman immediately lit up. He quickly soared into the air. Soon the end of his scarf disappeared into the broken window. Ramon watched the warrior go. His face looked surprised because his ally had risen so high into the air with just one jump. While the old man looked around the corridor and muttered that they had missed him, the squad leader managed to remember that he had an aura. The swordsman smiled, muttering that the dear slave could hide as long as she wanted. At this time, Siren and her companion ran along another corridor. The couple ran along the corridor, glanced at Cirrus, and said that they needed to go back to the room for equipment. The elf replied that they were probably waiting there. The guy frowned, and said that they could handle 1 or 2 nights. It was still better than running around with a single blade. Cirrus looked at the guy, and mentally said that at first he seemed like a naive child to her. One of the warriors stood at the door. The elf was above Jimin. An instant, she kicked him in the face. When the girl put on her cloak, Selen immediately scolded her, telling her that they did not have time to change. The priest used purification magic on the room, erasing all traces. Lantis walked down the corridor. Thanks to his aura, he could see the entire area. He was a swordsman who had reached certain heights in fencing and owned an aura. Kicking the door with his foot, the man asked himself, was that child really capable of erasing traces of presence like a high-ranking priest? The swordsman entered the room. Looking at the window, he said that the children had escaped after all. Raman, sweating heavily, asked the warrior if he had really let the fugitives escape. The man closed his eyes and smiled, saying that they couldn't have gone far, so Hesselt let the dogs go. The events take us to the streets of the city. Cirrus, looking around, asked if it wouldn't be better to get lost in the crowd. The priest answered by saying that they should avoid people as much as possible, because no one would help slaves running away from their owners. Sweating and breathing heavily, Selen mentally said that even the Holy Order wouldn't help them. Now he understood why the pilgrims were dying like flies. The guy gritted his teeth, realizing that if he returned now, he would again be in her power, and he would never return with such a miserable body. Raising his hands, Selen wed, saying that if Mr. Reffenhart were here, everything would have been resolved already. The elf heard him and asked incredulously, was the master really that strong? Selen did not answer. He folded his hands together and began to read a prayer. The feathers of fate began to swirl around the guy. A moment later, Mana rushed along the walls of the buildings due to the use of the Fork of Fate. Love is able to forge fate from chance. A chance meeting becomes destiny. A man meets a woman and says that their meeting is like a miracle. In the end, they get married. This is destiny. The probability of chance may be extremely small, but with a blessing, it becomes destiny, even a kiss. Selen opened his eyes and looked sadly at the sky. This spell was intended to find suitable couples, but now they had a different goal. Turning to the elf, the guy said that she was very strong. He had only seen an elf killer once, but she was much stronger. The girl responded by saying that he was no slouch either. He was already a saint of the highest rank at such a young age. The priest stood in a stupor, looking at the girl's back, heffled, as if he was talking not to a slave, but to an ordinary person. Could Saris be special? Looking around the buildings, the elf asked if they had come to where they needed to. The priest answered by saying that the thread breaks here. Suddenly both of them turned around wearily. Right in front of them was a figure of a knight. Sir stepped forward saying that it was not Mr. Reifenhart. Lontus grinned and said that he had finally caught the children, and thanks to them, he had warmed up well. Starting to approach them, the man said that they better not try to escape. Saris rushed forward, realizing that if they ran, they would expose their backs. All she could do was strike the enemy down and quickly get away from here. Lantis easily dodged her sword. Finding himself behind the girl, he said that she had good skills, and she was quite talented. Saris delivered a roundhouse kick. Her enemy moved and said that she seemed to have worked very hard to achieve such success, which was unusual for a slave. The elf looked at him, not understanding who her enemy was. The priest began to read a prayer, realizing that their enemy, being so strong, was very famous in the world of knights and swordsmen. But he did not understand why such a person would get involved in dirty deeds. The sword in the girl's hand glowed thanks to the blessings. Lontus was surprised and said that only a bishop could use so many sacred spells, not a high-ranking priest. Raising his hands, the priest said that Vasile was very famous in the south, and now Sir Saris would deal with him. Dodging each attack, the man said that with the priest's blessing, she had changed beyond recognition. Suddenly, Saris's sword split into two. Her eyes and mouth opened wide at the sight of the broken sword. Lantis struck with his sword, saying that she had gotten too carried away while he was playing with them. The priest froze in horror. He saw an aura around the man. Lantis himself, putting his sword in its hith, said that he could not even think that the Arb would force him to use an aura. The guy gritted his teeth, not understanding what the swordsman with the aura had forgotten here. Ramon approached the knight with a smile and asked if he had caught everyone. Theprius, who had picked up the elf in his arms, cried out upon hearing the knight's name. Lanthas, this bearded man, was a famous knight in the kingdom of Tan. He was the heir of a noble family who showed amazing military prowess, awakening an aura after years. However, Lanthas kept a secret that he could not share. He was sweating after the trial. The man had a terrible fetish, which appeared with the elf's slaves and even extended to royalty, and then was inevitably revealed in secular society. The priest screamed in horror, saying that it turns out that the monster was sitting in the principality of Chetan. The man grinned and said that he was very famous. Silam replied, saying Thath naturally knew him because he was told many times that if he walked at night, he would be captured by Lanthas. Lan then grinned, saying that he was just working off his salary and he killed hundreds of elves in Tan and then fled here. Silan gritted his teeth. Ramon walked up to the man with a smile on his face. From the merchant union's point of view, the knight's dishonor was nothing compared to the benefits that the Aura Lords gave them. In years, the Therafane Merchant Union had become the second largest in the Chan Principality, and this was thanks to Lontus, who extended his hand. He hit various points on the priest's body, saying that he knew what a high-ranking priest could do if he was allowed to speak freely. Ramon was wary and said that he could not harm the elf. Otherwise, the master would be dissatisfied. Lowering his hand, Lontus said that they could just hire a priest and heal her. Looking at the trembling priest, he said that he also looked cute, so he would take him along. Silan jumped up and shouted, saying that he was a guy. Stroking his collar and smiling, Lontus said that this would be a very unusual experience. but he would take care of him. Ramon extended his hand to the priest. A moment later, he pulled his hand back because of the wound. Lantis, stroking his beard, was surprised. Looking at Sillin, who had stood up, he asked how he had stood up without treatment since his tendons must have been torn. Apparently, he was the most beautiful, fragile, and trembling boy in the world. Sillin sweated profusely in horror when the knight said that they would have to cut off his small legs. Suddenly, the wall behind him collapsed with a roar. Sillin immediately turned around. The protagonist walked through the smoke, saying that he had finally found the bastards. Clenching his fist and getting angry, he asked how they dared to treat Cirrus like that. Streams of air came through the hole in the wall. Riefenhardt took off his jacket. Lantis frowned at him. Studying the protagonist aura, he realized that this was not just a young guy who was lucky with his physique. He felt a strong aura emanating from him. Ramon, who was standing next to him, said that this waste current owner of the slave. The knight grinned and asked if he hadn't said that her buyer was an ordinary Pole. Grinning, he said that all Hissenses were going crazy from his mere presence, and he called him an ordinary brat. The protagonist gave his jacket to the priest. While the swordsman tried to understand why he couldn't determine the guy's strength level. Did he also possess an aura like him? Grabbing the hilt of the sword, the man said that it had been a long time since he had met someone as strong as him. He raised his hand, telling the man not to even think about making chivalrous speeches, being a dirty, perverted. Old man Lantis grinned and pulled out his sword. The protagonist clenched his fist. A moment later, he rushed forward. The swordsman swung his sword. Two auras collided, trying to pierce each other. The explosion from the collision shattered the slab under his feet. Riefenhardt's face twisted in disgust. He gritted his teeth and swung toe strike. Lantis grinned at his opponent. They had clashed many times, but were unable to hurt each other. Ramon covered himself with his hand and shouted that, if they got stuck between them while trying to escape, they would easily die. Sillin, not paying attention. Shonto, the battle, was healing the elf. She turned her head and asked if misted her. Riefenhardt also possessed an aura. The priest was surprised, saying that he hadn't told her. The girl's eyes widened in shock. Reflecting the attack and gritting his teeth, Lantis told himself that this was not the level of a person who had just awakened his aura. The swordsman waved his hand and sent arcs of aura at the enemy. Along the way, the aura bent, changing the trajectory of the attack. Riefenhardt struck himself behind his back, reflecting the enemy's aura. Lantis raised his sword. He was shocked that the guy was too skillful in controlling the aura. Did he really open the aura in his teens, but somehow retained a childish face? At years old, sweating heavily, the man said that it was all underscore. The protagonist waved his hands and repelled another attack. He frowned and began to get angry, not understanding how the Perverthwo reached out to Cirrus dared to have such strength and skills. Repelling each enemy attack, the protagonist decided to beat the one who claims that martial arts build the right. Character Lantis climbed onto one of the pillars. His opponent repelled his sword with a wave of his hand, which was incredible. Lowering the sword, he asked Kethguy if he was really a student of the king of martial arts, Gerard. Riefenhardt did not answer, frowning at the enemy. Lantis looked at the guy with an aura swirling around him and asked why he cared so much about this slave one. He was so strong. Riefenhardt released an aura from his body out of anger. He screamed in anger, saying Thathos, they called slaves, have feelings and a will. A stream of air crashed into the swordsman's body. Rushing forward, the angry protagonist asked the enemy if he had even tried talking to them, wondering why they became like this. The guy's aura destroyed the pillar the enemy was standing on. Dodging the enemy's attacks, Lantis said that he had no idea what he was trying to prove. The protagonist gritted his teeth, seeing the same reaction as the others, an unshakable belief that any creature other than humans was only sick. Rushing into the attack, he mentally said that humans can clearly see how representatives of other species cry and laugh, but still refused to let go of the fact that they have feelings. Lantis, dodging the attack, said that it was natural that they, being the pinnacle of evolution, make other slaves. Who are they if not slaves? Riefenhardt, striking the man's head, asked why the descendants of great spirits should bear such a heavy cross, clenching his fist. The protagonist asked Lantis if it really didn't even occur to him that if people weren't at the helm, they themselves could very well become slaves. Lantis swung his sword, reflecting the guy's attack. The protagonist suffering. The wounds that formed on his body mentalized that, when people enslaved the orcs, humanity ecstatically celebrated the victory. When they deprived the dwarves of their will, they also had fun and laughed. And when they subjugated the elves to their power, they enjoyed the triumph. Riefenhart jumped on his opponent, saying that if he allows slavery to exist, then he himself must be ready to become a slave one day. Lantis, sweating heavily, told the guy that he was crazy. Did he really think that elves were equal to humans? The man quickly jumped back, saving himself from the protagonist's blow. Riefenhart stood up and ran towards him, saying that Cirrus was not a slave. Lantis jumped up, dodging the blow. He gritted his teeth as he struck. The opponent's swords collided. The man's body bent. The protagonist struck with his foot. He was going to break this vicious circle. Because if you do not try to change false ideas, one day everyone will live in fear. Lanta's body crashed into Thule. The man gritted his teeth in pain. The protagonist was next to him in an instant. Blood flowed from his frowning face. He was going to fix everything. Put an end to slavery. Lantis stared at the warrior in fear. Riefenhart struck his booty. The swordsman coughed up blood. His body was driven into the wall. With a blow, Riefenhart broke through Thule. The swordsman flew at great speed into another wall, clenching his fist. The protagonist said that he would change this world no matter what, so that no one would call Sir a slave anymore. The elf, standing behind, looked at the guy. She opened her mouth in shock when the protagonist said that for Sir's sake he would change this entire. The girl, remembering the protagonist fight and his shouts, asked herself how obsessed with role-playing in games one must be to say such nonsense. Was he really a hopeless pervert? The elf remembered how the guy striking said that the descendants of great spirits should not bear such a cross. Cirrus immediately imagined her mother, telling her that they were descendants of great spirits. The girl frowned slightly. Lantis, lying under Thurible, asked the protagonist to spare him. Riefenhart stood in front of him and asked why on earth he should spare Suck, a perverted degenerate like him. The man answered by saying that he swears on his name that he is nor repented and will reflect on his sins and do only good for the rest of his days. The swordsman smiled nervously when the protagonist said that he was lying to him. Gritting his teeth, the angry Riefenhart said that he relighted the Holy Order of Seer. Was he really allowed to do whatever he wanted while he went to repent in the temple? If he really regretted his actions, he would go to prison. The man, bleeding and terrified, said that he was ready to surrender to the authorities. But he should not dirty his hands with such a worthless person like him. The guy's pupils sparkled when he said that his hands were already elbow deep in blood, but he would still believe him. Lantis smiled widely upon hearing this. Flexing his fist, Riefenhart said that if he really repented, he would certainly think that he deserved to die, that it would be better to die quickly to pay for his deeds. Surreal and Sillin froze in horror. Riefenhart struck the slab and crushed the swordsman. The protagonist frowned and said that he shouldn't have used the word remorse so thoughtlessly. Only ruins remain where houses had once been. The protagonist stood in front of Cirrus and Sillin and asked if they were safe. Theprius replied saying that he had already healed everything. The elf, slightly embarrassed, asked the guy if he himself was okay. The protagonist shuddered and became embarrassed from shock because Cirrus herself spoke Tohim, and there was almost no coldness in her voice. Pointing at Ramon, the priest said that these guys were running away. Riefenhart immediately waved his hand, telling the guys to come to him. The men sweated heavily from fear when the guy said that they could still try to escape, and he would arrange an unforgettable evening for them in return. Ramen smiled nervously when the protagonist asked him who gave him the order, forming a weapon. For Mana, the protagonist said that they were lucky today because he was merciful. The three guys smiled nervously, not understanding what that club was for. The moon in the sky brightly illuminated the ground. Riefenhart looked at the beaten people, and Eskadwo was behind all this. The men sitting on their knees immediately answered, saying that it was all trick. The protagonist immediately imagined the fat man. He was the one who bullied Sir Cirrus for whole years in his past life. It was him that Reifenhart wanted to kill the most. But when he came, he was already dead. Ramon, surprised, asked if they would follow him. It would be better if they did not do this. If so, they should not do this because all Ufchan would turn against them. The guy grinned and put his hands on his hips. The guys trembled when Reichenhard said that he knew perfectly well what the fat man was. After the protagonist left, the guys began to press themselves against Commander because of the cold. He objected and swore, swearing to kill them. The events take us to the mansion. The purple-haired man said that the servants were taking too long to deliver the elf. Tak frowned and said that he himself did not understand why Ramon was gone for so long. Looking at the trembling elves, the man asked who they were. Tak answered by saying that they were Lantis toys. Looking at the door, the merchant's guests said that it was somehow too noisy outside. The merchant answered by saying that they were probably holding another rally there. The warriors ran towards the enemy with a scream. Blood flowed from the nose and mouth of the knight in front. A second later, all three were bleeding from the blow they received. Sillin crouched down next to the wounded man and began to heal him. Reifenhart looked at the guy and asked if this was not a spell that was usually used to heal a broken heart, to forget your unhappy love. The priest turned his head and said that there are few funny moments in battles either. Following the protagonist, the priest asked him how he would get rid of unnecessary witnesses if it weren't for his skills. The warrior responded by saying that he would just come and rip off their heads. Suddenly, an orc stood in front of the group. Takata shouted, saying that he would not let strangers pass. Raising his hand, the protagonist told the orc that he had the blood of a warrior in him, but the one he was so stubbornly protecting was not worth it at all. So why would he even raise his sword for him? Tolkata, holding his sword in front of him, said that he was a warrior and he had his own obligations. If he was swept away or broken, how could he call himself a Va? The orc frowned when the protagonist told him that he was living in slavery, because that man was not even a mentor of life. Tolkata, gripping this word title with both hands, said that even if that was so, a warrior must see things through to the end, even if he was forced to. The protagonist chuckled. This type of Orish thinking was familiar to him. The priest standing behind asked the guy how he knew the Orish language. Cirrus approached the protagonist and said that she would take care of this orc herself. Taking out her sword, she said that now she had the necessary weapon. The orc, releasing his aura, said she had become stronger. Squinting and looking at the priest, the protagonist told him to cover Cirrus. Tolkata, looking at the passing guy, asked him if he was really going to ignore him and go straight to the master. The protagonist answered saying that his opponent was an elf paying attention to him. He was showing disrespect to his opponent. Tolkata frowned and said that he spoke correctly. Inside the room, a faint fog was still hanging. Reifenhart stopped, sensing this fog. Opening the doors, he realized that the smoke was a drug. What he saw made the guy's eyes widen. There was a body lying on the floor. Blood splashes painted the entire room.